Louis Pasteur, Joseph Lister, and Robert Koch were inspiring how they pushed barriers to finding out what germs are and how they can be applied to medicine. They went out of their way to make medicine better for everyone back then and now.
When Louis Pasteur was a little boy, he loved to make daily trips to the chemist's shop to watch him make medicine by mixing roots mashed into powders and weirdly colored liquids. Pasteur would listen to customers and their complaints, always answered by the chemist, telling them to stop by the following day and he would have their solution ready. "I do what I can to help people," the chemist said, "but disease is hard to fight. It comes out of nowhere." Later in Pasteur's life, he was sent to a boarding school in Besançon, 30 miles away from Arbois. He had a great start in his studies and ended up taking extra teaching from a chemist. Louis wrote a letter to his parents saying, "I hold a steady place among the best students in my classes, but I hope my standing will be even better within a few months." When he took the assessment to make it into college, Louis was accepted out of the 22 that made it. He was 15th on the list, but couldn't accept it, waiting 2 more years to retake the test. That time, he made it out 4th on the list. This time, he was ready. Louis graduated college with honors in mathematics, physics, and Latin. Louis started studying in the laboratory and eventually became a professor. Louis still kept searching for answers to why things were how they were. He found answers to most of his questions. The reason was bacteria. These microscopic cells spoil milk, rot grapes, and cause disease. Louis found that by warming milk up, kept bacteria out of it for a long period of time. This process is called pasteurization, named after Louis Pasteur. Even after he discovered bacteria, he kept studying to try to find a way to cure rabies. There was a little boy who lived in Germany named Joseph Meister. He had been bitten by a rabid dog 14 times, but soon after, the parents of Joseph received the daily newspaper containing an article that Louis Pasteur had made a vaccine for rabies. The parents took him all the way to France. Louis was hesitant to give an untested vaccine to Joseph, but was reluctant after other physicians told him that he would die without the vaccine anyway. Louis Pasteur saved Joseph Meister's life with his vaccine. Pasteur later made a vaccine for anthrax. Louis will be forever remembered for his discoveries, paving a path for doctors and scientists up the road to follow, changing medicine to what we know today.
Dr. Joseph Lister was a medical scientist who discovered how hand washing can save lives by learning to use antiseptics in surgery. He became known as the father of modern surgery. Dr. Lister was born on April 5, 1827, in Upton, England. He was raised in a large family with 6 siblings. His dad was also a scientist and even designed special lenses for microscopes. Learning how to use his father's microscope at a young age helped Lister to want to become a surgeon and study science. As a young child, he attended private school at 2 different Quaker schools. He then went to college at the University of London Medical School in 1844. He eventually received his medical degree from Oxford in 1852. Lister became known as a surgeon right around the time when the anesthetics had been introduced, which was a medicine to make surgery pain-free. This allowed surgeons to do more complicated procedures that led to way more infections and a lot more people dying. Surgeons needed a safer way to do complicated surgeries, but also needed a way for the wound not to get infected after the surgery. A turning point for Dr. Lister's career took place in 1864 when he was working at Glasgow University as a professor of surgery. This is when he first heard about germ theory and decided he wanted to prove that Pasteur's hypothesis was right and could be applied to people. Before this time, almost 50% of people would die either during surgery from blood loss or a few days after from infection in a surgical wound. Because of this, the treatment for a broken arm would be amputation rather than trying to save the arm. Surgical instruments weren't even washed until they were put away for storage, and the same tools were used on multiple patients in a row. Joseph Lister felt that Louis Pasteur could be onto something, and he was so excited to prove that Pasteur's theory was right. He started by using his home laboratory to investigate how germ theory could be applied to surgical infections. He was assisted by his wife Agnes. They figured out that carbolic acid in a surgical wound would block the germ from entering the wound, and the surgical infection rate decreased significantly. After making discoveries at home, he extended his research to official clinical trials in hospitals, and the first 2 papers on his antiseptic methods were published in 1867. This helped him establish a reputation as a surgeon, as he opened the doors for more complicated surgeries like abdominal and other body cavities. Dr. Lister's dream finally came true in the 1870s, when doctors finally started washing their hands and their surgical instruments in between patients.
Robert Koch is known as a great German physician and one of the many founders of bacteriology, and for his Nobel Prize in 1905 for discovering Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Robert was born December 11, 1843, where he practiced medicine. Koch graduated in 1866 and became a physician. From 1870 to 1871, Koch was a field surgeon in the Franco-Prussian War, which was a big deal, threatening France's power, turning Koch and Lister against each other. They competed to represent their country better, pushing their research more and more. He built a small laboratory in Wallstein. He had many instruments to help him research, including a microscope and a microtome. A microtome is used to cut tissues into thin slices, useful for larger items Koch wanted to see under the microscope. He would also grow germs in petri dishes. In the 19th century, Robert Koch determined that a certain germ could cause a specific disease. He found this out through experiments with anthrax disease. Koch discovered cholera in 1883 and also discovered Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which causes tuberculosis. On April 9th, he had a heart attack and never fully recovered. Robert Koch died May 27, 1910, just 3 days after giving a speech about the research he had done on tuberculosis at the age of 66.
Germ theory is a great example for a turning point in history. This theory is a revolutionary concept that changed science forever. In conclusion, Louis Pasteur, Dr. Lister, and Robert Koch were 3 influential figures for how passionate they were. Their minds were always set on whatever they did and never gave up. Louis Pasteur is known for his groundbreaking work in germ theory and the development of vaccine for diseases like rabies and anthrax. Dr. Lister revolutionized the field of surgery with his antiseptic methods, drastically reducing the risk of infections for patients undergoing procedures. Robert Koch is credited with isolating and identifying the bacteria responsible for causing deadly diseases like tuberculosis and cholera, paving the way for the development of effective treatments. These 3 people built this structure for what medicine is today.